Hi, listeners, and welcome to It's the People, our interview series where we explore the inside story of building companies and investment portfolios, speaking with high-octane founders, limited partners, and fund managers. We hope these conversations push you to be even better at what you do. My name is Andy Greenfield, and I'm a general partner at TIA Ventures, which is a seed-stage investment fund. In this episode, my partner Wills Hafworth and I had the opportunity to interview John Kamen. John is the founder and chairman CEO of RadicalMedia, one of the world's leading producers of premium content across all media platforms. John has over 175 film and television credits to his name, and over the course of his career, he has won virtually every award in the industry, including the Academy Award, the Grammys, the Cannes Palme d'Or, Emmys, Lions, D&ADs, and more. At the same time, he has innovated in virtually every medium in which he has worked: film, documentaries, television, advertising, and Broadway. John has consistently demonstrated the ability to anticipate where the puck is going before others see that, and to create compelling content around that vision. In our conversation with John, we discussed a range of topics, including the parallels between his work as a producer and our work as early-stage technology investors. We discussed the pivotal moment in his early childhood that set him on the path that became his career and life's work. We talked about the importance of being an historian and a thinker, and helping him see where the puck may be going before others do. His key insight about looking at humans as humans and not as consumers, and much more. To start things off, John begins the conversation with his life story in 60 seconds.
Before we begin, we'd like to note that this interview is for informational purposes only, and that the opinions expressed should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. TIA Ventures is a seed-stage fund focusing primarily on early-stage business-to-business technology companies, with an obsessive focus on end customers and early teens.
John, if you don't mind, and I know it's hard, can you give us your life story in 60 seconds?
You know, in 60 seconds, it's kind of scary, but I am a product of New York City schools. I was told I could graduate early from high school, and the day I was told I could graduate early, I don't think I ever went back. So I'm not 100% sure I actually graduated. And I ended up going to the School of Visual Arts because I wanted to be a photographer, and photography was my thing. And I got into the School of Visual Arts, and I left. I never really stayed at Visual Arts, so I can't say I'm even a graduate of any college. But at the time, Visual Arts wasn't an accredited university. It was just an art school. I ended up working for photographers in New York at a time when all photographers were starting to look at this thing called television, because it was 20-something years old at that point, if you consider the early 50s being the invention of television. And all these photographers were becoming directors. So while I worked for some really great photographers in New York, many of them were transitioning into becoming directors. And if you're an assistant to a photographer, I guess you could say a producer is an assistant to a director. It's not really technically the term. An assistant director is a union term, but I started producing for photographers turned directors. And I had a very successful career with one particular photographer in the 70s and 80s. And it led to my effectively buying him out of the company we had started together and starting RadicalMedia in 1993. And when I started RadicalMedia, I knew just enough to be dangerous. There was already enough indication of things that were going to change the media landscape. The internet hadn't fully blossomed yet. Of course, Netscape only came through in 1994. But I used to attend intellectual conferences like the TED conference. And there would be speakers like a Nicholas Negroponte from MIT talking about this digital future that we were going to all live in, the internet. And there were all sorts of incredible other speakers that were suggesting the impact that this was going to have. So when I reinvented the company in 1993, I actually registered it as @radical.media to represent the embracing of the future of all media and not having it be a film company, not having it be a photography company, but saying, this fancy statement of we'll take all hostages. I can proudly say, though, 30 years later, that we can really fulfill the vision of what my original vision was for the company. Today, we still produce a tremendous amount of advertising around the world. We're well known for that. We're quite well known for our entertainment work. And as you might have noticed, we've had a few successes there as well. And then I have a third leg of the stool of our company, which I call our studio. And in our studio, what we do is not only work for certain very prestigious brands directly, but we also use that studio to incubate some of our own original ideas and developing some new ventures and some new business ourselves. So the combination of those three legs of the stool is effectively the vision I had for the company in 93 that we actually are living today, for better or for worse.
So John, I'm curious, and that's and there's so much to unpack and dig into that, but I just want to take one step back.
Might have gone over 60 seconds. Not much, though.
We'll some of our time to you. So if we can take a step back, you're not a guy who spent 40 years working at IBM or pick whatever company, Nike, whoever. You're an entrepreneur by any measure.
Yes.
And a successful one. But I'm curious, as you look back in your family, and I don't know a lot I know much more about Michael, but I think Vinny had said your dad was a dentist.
Dad was a dentist.
And
my oldest brother was a dentist. My other brother was Michael, the composer and the artist in his own right. Producer as well, music, a lot of incredible soundtracks to movies, but also produced Pink Floyd and Metallica and Eurythmics and other major groups. I have a third brother who's a doctor in Philadelphia. And my father always used to describe the four boys in my family. Paul's a dentist, Michael's a composer, Lenny is a doctor, and Johnny plays TV.
So my point in bringing this up is is as far as I can tell, these are all entrepreneurial activities, whether it's call it a small one-man shop versus whatever. Is this part, as you look back or you look across the the Kamen genealogy, is that stuff in your veins or DNA, or is it just
no, quite the opposite. I think that the beauty of my parents was their encouragement for us to pursue something that we truly loved. And for all the backstory that I gave you, of course, my parents were well educated. My mother was a teacher. My father being a professional and a professor of dentistry as well. But it's interesting, maybe because I was the fourth of four boys, or maybe it was their liberal thinking, but they always encouraged any of us to pursue something that we truly loved and were passionate about. My oldest brother might have defaulted to becoming a dentist in the tradition of a family tradition. But, little of that actually had to do with the Vietnam War, and at a time where he could get his deferment by being a medical professional, and going to school extra years kept him out of the Army and kept him out of Vietnam. So he became a dentist. Michael went to Juilliard, and Michael left Juilliard. So he finally did get an honorary degree, but he had a much more successful career before they ever gave him that honorary degree. But he left Juilliard prematurely, as well as it set an example for me to pursue my opportunities. And my other brother, the doctor, was a professional hippie until he decided he wanted to give back to society. And the community lived on up in Vermont, called the Dreamers, all decided to dedicate their lives to worthwhile causes. He became an ambulance driver, and I guess he was such a good ambulance driver, some doctors in the town that he was an ambulance driver put him through medical school because he had proven that he was such a good doctor. So I think that my parents' openness to letting us pursue our dreams, and, that cliche, pursue whatever it is, just be, really good at whatever it is you do, was good enough for my mother. And, my father, like myself, might have been a bit of a workaholic. So, and in a beautiful way, my mother was very sympathetic to my father's passion for his work and accepted his workaholism as a family trait. And I think that's important because as you know, my wife, Andy, she's put up with my workaholic ways for our very long marriage of 44 years. And she honestly has never complained about something I needed to do for work. She's always sort of understood it. And there are some sacred days and some commitments we make that you have to honor. But otherwise, it's even like coming home late last night and leaving this morning and telling her I got a dinner tonight, and I got to drive up to RISD because the high school dropout and college dropout, I'm the vice chair of the board of Rhode Island School of Design. And I've been on the board for 15 years. So, she understands that I follow my passion, and that's what makes our marriage. We always say we've been married that long, but only together for 2 years.
We're going to circle back to some of that. And for those of you, the listeners who don't know John, I think probably got his 15 million mile pin from one of the airlines.
Oh yes, I have. It's. I don't know if it's the proudest moment when they come out and announce that there's someone on the plane who's just earned another badge, but when I found out it was me, I was a little depressed.
John, if I may, just one last question on kind of early life. Any key moments that jump out at you that you think defined, or that you look back on now that you think defined who you became, the path?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There is something. I grew up in a very working class neighborhood in Queens, and it was very much on my parents' intention that they wanted us to live in a community that represented a slice of New York, and not in some luxury part of the city or any other place. It was there, again, very liberal thinking. But I will admit to you that there was a point in my youth in which I could have gone the wrong way with a bunch of kids who were following the path that didn't lead to any good, whether it was, pure vandalism or alcoholism or drugs. There was a heavy dose of that going on within the neighborhood I grew up in. And when at one point I realized I was going to probably end up in quite a bit of trouble, and there were a couple of instances where I really could have disappointed my parents and disappointed my family, I took up photography in the self-taught in the Jamaica Library. And photography was my salvation. It allowed me to have a passion, to learn everything I could. I was able to buy a camera from a guy who sold me his Pentax for $100. And apparently he's gone on to become a very famous artist, a guy by the name of Terry Winters. I don't know if Terry remembers that he sold me his camera, but that opportunity to do a deep dive in photography and when I could have gone the wrong way, really changed my life, obviously. And to this day, I would still remember, developing photographs in the bathroom in the basement of my parents' house, listening to the chaos going on outside in the schoolyard or wherever with the firecrackers or the cherry bombs or whatever else my friends were up to, thinking that I was very lucky that I had found this particular passion that has really affected my life forever.
And one quick springboard off of that, John, you could have said, okay, I got interested in botany or raising plants or, carving wood. Was there anything that got, because I remember your place, your home in Bedford was like a beautiful photographic art museum. Was there anything that sort of a spark that was ignited relative to?
Well, yeah, I will say that the photography in Life and Look magazine, very influential. And ironically, I vividly remember the music, of course, was a big part of my house. My father loved music. They encouraged all of us to play musical instruments. All of my brothers were incredibly musical. Unfortunately, by the time they got down to me, they gave me a flute. And what the hell could you play on a flute? It was like,
Ian Anderson made it work.
I know, but he's about the only one, It was like flute thing was like the one song you could play. And after that, you were sort of screwed and in the wrong section of the orchestra. But the reality of it is that at a certain point in the early 60s, there was a gorgeous set of 4 photographs of the Beatles. There were these beautiful photographs taken by this guy right here on my right, Richard Avedon. And I cut those photographs out of that magazine, and I think it was in Look magazine and not in Life. And I very carefully cleaned up a wall of my bedroom and hung those 4 pictures very religiously in the middle of this big wall. And it became my sense of decorating, but it began my passion and love for this art form of photography. And ironically, I ended up working with Dick Avedon towards the end of his career. The latter 10 years or so of Dick's life, I represented him and did a bunch of really beautiful work with him. And some of that photography that you've seen in my house, Andy, is partly Avedon and Irving Penn and some of the masters who influenced my career that I collected when you could afford to collect those photographs. But the interesting, I think the pivotal moment was seeing photography as art, as an art form, and not just an everyday thing, but that it could be treated as art.
John, most people outside your profession may have never heard your name.
Yeah.
But once they go to your IMDb, they'll recognize pretty much everything there. I think they'll be blown away by your accomplishments, the diversity of what you've achieved. You've won awards in every genre you've operated in. You know, whether it's TV, film, name it.
We haven't won a Tony. We've been affiliated with Tony Award-winning shows, but I can't give us credit for that. But we've been involved, and we were 4 times nominated for Academy Awards. We've won Academy Awards twice. The Fog of War, which was one of my early films, and most recently last year, The Summer of Soul. But 2 other times with Joe Berlinger from Colgate, we were nominated for Paradise Lost, which you could argue was the beginning of this entire genre of wrongful conviction and exoneration of the subjects. And similarly, we produced Netflix's first ground-up documentary. When I say ground up, before that, Netflix used to see a good documentary and acquire it. I sold Netflix the idea of funding What Happened, Miss Simone, and that went all the way to the Academy Awards. We lost to Amy Winehouse, the year that the Academy Awards could have honored an infamous African-American woman who the year the Oscars were proclaimed too white. They could have honored Nina Simone, and instead they gave it to a I don't want to defame Amy Winehouse in any way, but she was slightly intoxicated most of the time. Interestingly enough, that Nina Simone film is what led to our Summer of Soul film, because if you've ever seen that film on Netflix, there's a few minutes of the Harlem Cultural Festival in What Happened with Simone that then leads to us, where's the rest of that footage? And it turned out in a guy's basement for 50 years.
Wow. So with regard to the Tony, I think it's safe to say your work here on Earth is not yet done then.
Yeah, we're still looking for that Broadway show. We do a lot of work in theater. Obviously, we've worked with Lin-Manuel Miranda, not just on Hamilton, the Disney version of Hamilton that's out around the world, but we worked with him on his first venture right out of school, which was Freestyle Love Supreme, and then his first Broadway show, which was In the Heights, that we followed from the workshops all the way to the night that he won the Grammy. Not the Grammy, excuse me, the Tony. So he's won Grammys too, though. He's a pretty talented guy himself.
But my point in alluding to your successes, the awards, what I'm really curious about is when you wake up in the morning, you walk in and you look at the mirror. What do you see there when you look at John Kamen?
It's interesting, Andy. I think it was the work I've got to do, and what I've got to, what's on the agenda, not just for the day, but the big picture of like, where's this all going, right? And you're constantly having to tweak. We don't need to remind everybody business goes through cycles. The economy goes through cycles. Listen, the media landscape, which we're very dependent on, is in an interesting time for all of its explosion of streaming and networks and cable television and everything else. It's currently very challenged by not only Wall Street, but they're all vying for audiences, and they may have reached an interesting saturation point. We're constantly having to figure out what is our next project. And we're constantly having to look out in that future to determine what we think is going to be popular with an audience. And in choosing whether it's the next documentary we do or the next multi-part series that we do, or my meetings in London where we're adapting a book into a multi-year scripted series about the earliest days of the oil industry, and taking that on as a project is a new height for us in that we've been mostly known for our nonfiction work. This will be a scripted narrative piece. However, it's based on a factual story that was very well researched. But when I look at myself in the mirror, I sort of look at like what I have ahead of me and what else I have to do, and how perhaps yesterday's meetings are going to fulfill that role of that future. And it directly relates to it's about the people, because I'm probably constantly thinking about what I'll call the casting of the people to accomplish the goals and the dreams that we are pursuing. And as a producer, we're very often taking an idea and figuring out who should be the director of that idea, and who's that person that's going to creatively lead the project, and who else on the team might need to be surround that person in order to achieve that. A great example of that is Summer of Soul, because some people never believed that Amir Thompson, Questlove, could direct a movie, because he had never directed a movie before. But he not only directed his first movie, but he hit a home run out of the park and won every practical award you could win, with the exception of a Tony. But he'll win a Tony someday too, because he's a great writer. But I think that we knew that he could do it. We surrounded him with other people who we knew could support him, and he trusted that we were going to put him around other people that were going to support him. So much so, I'm doing 3 more projects with him that have yet to be announced, but we're very excited about them because we're thrilled that he's chosen to continue to work with us. And it only becomes a signature of our contribution to his work that he continues to want to work with us. So that concept of it's about the people is something I understand very dearly, in terms of not only in the choosing of talent for a project, but of course I run a company. We have about 100 or so people who work here at Radical, and I'm constantly, as the CEO and the chairman of the company, having to tweak and to adjust and to rethink some of the players within the company, and recognizing people's strengths and perhaps their weaknesses, and trusting their capabilities to be able to grow the company. And I have some incredible people who have been with me, embarrassingly, in some cases. I did a dinner the other night for a guy who has been with me for over 40 years.
Yeah.
We've worked together. Okay. And at his own so-called retirement party, he said, "John's not letting me retire. I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to do some stuff." But it's true. I said to him, "What do you want to retire for? What are you going to do? You don't play golf. You might as well just work when you want to work." So I've got a couple of people who've been with me that long through my career, and I have several who've been with me for over 20-something years. And the work ethic and the institutional knowledge and the reputation of the company is based in all about the people. It is about familiar, not only faces, but the consistency of delivering something, the trust that companies have in us to deliver something because of this well-oiled machine that's been around a long time. And sometimes you look at these newly formed companies, they can be brilliant, but they don't have that. They don't have that work ethic through and through when things get rough, when things get tough, when things don't go necessarily according to plan. And thankfully, I would like to say, I feel as if we're a bit battle tested because of that.
Wow, there's this segues into a whole bunch of questions that we definitely hope we can get to in the time allotted. The one I'd love to just drill in on here, you had the concept of what is our next project. And in researching you, this concept of never established, RadicalMedia has never been established, came up many times. And what I'm curious about is some might perceive never established, because you've, again, as Andy said, you've won awards across every genre. You describe yourselves as kind of platform agnostic, looking at all sorts of opportunities. Some might perceive never established as I follow my heart and we get lucky. And yet you've done it over and over and over and over again. Your batting average is just insanely high. So if it is never established, what we're trying to understand is, like, what is the North Star that drives your decision-making, your strategy, how you allocate your time and capital and institutional knowledge? Like, what is the North Star?
That never established mantra is, it really has, in a combination of both our name as RadicalMedia and never established, I don't want to say it was a joke. It was when we were opening these offices in New York in 1993, a woman who still works for me for this day had said to me, "Do you want to say established 1993?" And I was like, "No, never established." And but it's funny, even when I created RadicalMedia and came up with the name RadicalMedia, which, by the way, I was looking for a new name, and at the time it was about 1992, 93, and Ed Arts, who was the then chairman of Procter & Gamble, a very conservative company, was lambasting the advertising industry for not paying attention to the radical changes that were taking place in the media landscape. And I read that article in the New York Times and saw that it was okay for a conservative chairman of a conservative company to use the word radical. Up until then, it was considered a somewhat revolutionary word. And he, again, referenced media and not just films or television or what have you as a broader term. And I put the two things together, throwing an @ sign in front because I wanted people to know that we were going to be forward thinking. And I would take that logo and I would shove it under the nose of people who I was hoping would join me in this new venture. And I'll never forget, there was this one Australian director who looked at it and he says, "Whoa, with a name like that, you're going to have to do something." And it was kind of true. It kind of gave us a mission that you just couldn't accept the status quo. We constantly had to embrace change. And never established, of course, is sort of the definition of that. We never sit back and rest on our laurels. We're constantly looking for what is going to change and how are we going to get ahead of it. And I think the reason that we still exist and the reason that we've done as well as we've done and broken some ground in multiple categories, and I think it is everything to do with that having a sense of a mantra and a DNA of a company, and looking at not the status quo, but constantly pushing the envelope, constantly looking at new technologies, being known for a company that's not afraid to attempt to utilize new technologies in innovative ways. And maybe sometimes we're a little too ahead of the wave and sometimes we miss the wave. as any business person or any surfer would know. But occasionally we've caught it. And, and I feel as if like we just have to keep paddling to make sure that we're looking for what the next big wave is going to be, and that somewhere in that, we're going to find that secret sauce or that formula that makes it an area in which we can truly leverage the unique capabilities of this company.
And just so I can fully understand, so does that mean that Never Established is in fact the North Star, and kind of what you're always doing is trying to figure out where can we be right on the cusp, be radical, be looking for the wave that's coming? And that takes us into a bunch of different areas.
Yeah, I would definitely say Never Established, and even our name in itself is a North Star.
You make me smile, John, because at one point I owned the URL, What's Next? And if I still had it, I would give it to you.
Yeah.
We sometimes think about themes. And one of the themes I think of when I think of your career is transitions and sort of moving along. And it's part of this never established feeling. And, sometimes there's transitions just happen. Client says something and we're, well, we've never done that, but we'll be happy to try it. Other times there's an epiphany. You're sitting by the water and all of a sudden, you see 2 satellites go by and you go, holy shit.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the transitions that you guys have? You've gone from advertising for the world's major brands to branded content, which was a totally new thing, to documentaries, to Illuminaria. How does that happen?
Well, in that What's Next theme, I think that I'm a little bit of, oddly enough, historian at the same time. And I'm always fascinated by the history of anything. We do a lot of work, by the way, as you may or may not know, for the History Channel, working with authors like Ron Chernow on his Ulysses S. Grant books, and Doris Kearns Goodwin on Lincoln, and we're just finishing a fabulous series on Franklin Roosevelt right now. So we love history, and I happen to love history of technology and a history of media. And there are a couple little hints to all of that. At the turn of the last century, Thomas Edison, you could argue he was a pretty good entrepreneur. He was so enamored with theater, he invented the phonograph to try in some way capture what it was like to go to an original show and hear it again. And he put himself to work in inventing the phonograph record. It's kind of ironic that invention, which, led so many revolutions of music and everything else, that 100 years later, they're still creating soundtracks for a great Broadway show, when we could be, like we did with Hamilton or American Utopia, film the original cast of that Broadway show and not only have the original soundtrack, but see the original performance of that show. So I look at history as what's happened in television from when it was first invented in the actual 1920s, but wasn't really unleashed and presented to the world until after World War II, 1946, which was really mostly, call it radio with pictures. people standing in front of a microphone and a little, on a little Dumont television set that you went to some neighbor's house, to by 1952, 1953, the advent of the first serialized show, Gunsmoke, which was on the air for over 40 years and actually reinvented television as we knew it, from single-sponsored programming when it first began to basically co-opting the cost of Gunsmoke by creating commercial pods. And being a student of that, we watched commercial television grow and become mature over, call it a 30-something year period towards the end of the 70s. Out of desire for a better quality picture, the pole climbers or the cable companies started to create cable television. And it was not only to give you a better picture and to deliver a picture in parts of the country that couldn't get television, but eventually people like a Ted Turner or Bob Pittman and Tom Freston and others realized that there could also be not just the 3 networks, but there could be these specialty channels that emerged in the case of a 24-hour news channel. And I remember the early days of cable television. They said, yeah, someday there'll even be a food channel or a golf channel or a tennis channel. And a music channel. And it all happened. And television from the 1980s to the 2000s really was revolutionized by that history of change. And then and part of my evolution in that was recognizing that brands had a bigger opportunity to do something other than just putting a 30-second commercial into a television show. And companies like Nike, who we did a tremendous amount of work for when they were only just a little $2 billion brand, and they're probably like a 60-something billion dollar brand today. But the reality of it is, a company like Nike was so progressive and so creative with their advertising agency and the leadership at Nike at the time. We started producing pure programming for Nike going back to the future, like the earliest days of television. And on cable television, like MTV or what have you, we could actually have these fabulous television shows funded by Nike, by Grey Goose Vodka for another show, American Express and other companies we worked for. Unilever was involved. Procter & Gamble got involved. We produced programming that I thought was going to be able to deliver a bigger relationship between the brand and a consumer. In the 2000s, with the advent of broadband and the interruption or the disruption of the internet, a lot of brands just defaulted to, well, we could make anything we want and we could put it on the internet. And so the branded content business started to wane, which is what led me to doing pure entertainment and saying, we created some really entertaining shows for these brands. Why don't we just make some entertaining films or television shows? And that's what we pursued as a company. And that obviously has led to all of the success on the entertainment side of the company. I think, again, looking at that history, if it once was the 3 networks and then it became the cable industry, well, the latest disruption that we've all witnessed in the 2000s is along the lines of Netflix and streaming. And this concept of no longer having broadcast linear networks, but the idea of watching whatever it is you want on whatever device you want it on, whenever you want. Sure. And Netflix obviously led the charge, but everybody's followed. What's interesting to me right now is, while if you called it in the 1980s, the 3 networks, CBS, ABC, NBC, were often referred to as the three blind mice because they didn't see the cable business coming. Those cable companies didn't see this streaming business coming. And today, streaming has actually surpassed traditional cable or television viewership. The number of hours that all of us watch something streaming versus watching a network has surpassed our network time. So you look at that and you say, well, what's next? Well, one thing that I see as a company like Netflix has reached, in theory, 220 million households, and, Disney's pushing for that, and HBO is reinventing itself as something else. There's not just three blind mice anymore, but there's like 5 or 6 of them consolidating, forming, creating new platforms, Paramount Plus, Hulu, Disney Plus, Apple Plus, everybody's in the game. They're all plussing.
Yeah.
They're all competing against each other. Consumers are pushing back a little bit and going, how many subscriptions and how many monthly, fees can I have? And then you take, somebody like myself who hasn't cut the cord, who's still watching cable television as well. So there's a point where I think we're at a point of inflection where things are going to change once again. And that's what I see for Radical as what our next opportunity might be and how we might lead the way of something we haven't put our finger on it yet. But while we're busy still doing the same old and still making commercials for great companies and still making television shows for networks and streamers alike and making documentaries, we're also now looking at what we think might be next in that world of sameness. I think it's going to start to create opportunity for something new, and that's what I'm surging.
John, hearing you talk, and this is fascinating, you can't help but you had the amazing artistic accomplishments, but it's so clear that there's this business mindset that you have as well. I'm curious, do you think of yourself as more artist or more business person?
Well, I think of myself as one of the lucky ones. Most artists are usually not very great business people. Producers kind of have to be right and left-brained because we're responsible for the organization of something and the economics or the financing of something, as well as we have to understand that creative talent and appreciate the vision of something. So I think that's a blessing for me. I appreciate it. Some people could accuse me of being too much of an artist sometimes. And I probably am occasionally, and it probably does affect our bottom line that I can become a little too passionate about something versus practical or pragmatic about it. But I think in the end, it can all pay off. I think in the end, you can strike a balance. And I think that, part of my success and career has been, there are a lot of artists that have come and gone in and out of favor. And I'm still here because I'm interpreting an artist's work combined with facilitating its business opportunity.
I think that there's actually a lot of parallels in that regard between your business and our business, particularly that, we're investing at really early stages of software company development. And there is a bit of, kind of working with the creatives, the founders, and at the same time trying to understand how there's a business here. You had that concept at the beginning of, as a producer, you're a assistant to the director. I think in the same way we're, as investors, we're assistants to our
an assistant to an entrepreneur. Yeah,
to our directors. Yeah. We have a very clear rubric that enables us to make decisions around how to, spend our time and capital. because ultimately we have to make picks, and we're picking people and we're picking companies and opportunities. For us, we really fall back on what the customer of this product is saying. And, I know you know about Andy's background, but, he'd done that kind of qualitative research with customers his whole life.
Yeah.
Is there an equivalent of that? Once you get past being a historian, a trend analyzer, a businessman, and you ultimately have to make decisions and pick people like Lin-Manuel, who you picked successfully, and pick projects. Like, what is the mental rubric that you go through to say, is this something we should dedicate time and capital to?
Yeah. And I should correct you. Yes, I may have recognized the genius of Lin-Manuel Miranda. I won't say that I picked him. I was fortunate enough to meet him and recognize how immensely talented he was. And we forged a beautiful relationship from that, and have had and shared some beautiful success. He's even, far more successful than I could ever hope to be. But I think that, being able to, again, look at human beings as human beings and not consumers, and to recognize the instincts based on trend, but not all too often everybody's thinking of everyone in an almost Daffy Duck fashion of there are consumers. And I always remind people that audiences, for whether it's advertising or entertainment, or even embracing new technologies, the people are human beings at best and have to appreciate that product. And if they don't appreciate it, it quickly can rise and fall. And I think that audience appreciation or consumer appreciation or human appreciation are the measure that we try to appeal to. And I'm a little concerned right now that with all the data and everything that is collected, things are being viewed sometimes too heavily in just pure numbers. And black and white numbers are important, obviously, when one is measuring something financially. But the gray area of passion and the gray area of appreciation is not always and can't always be just measured in hardcore numbers. And I think that, for my next act, there's something that we're pursuing, which I'm fully recognizing isn't for everyone, but who it's for, they're particularly passionate about it. And if that's the case, maybe I don't have to appeal to everyone, but I need to appeal to that particular group of passionate individuals who will provide the value proposition that we're projecting. So I think that's striking the balance of what we do and who we are and where we want to go.
Let's do a 2-minute drill then, since we have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah.
Best decision you ever made?
Reinventing the company.
Worst decision you ever made?
Probably just selling a part of it too early and fortunately being able to buy it back.
The hardest decision you ever made at Radical?
It's always when somebody is unfortunately not living up to expectations and having to share that with somebody that it's perhaps not right for them and that they have to move on. It's always really hard.
The crucible moment. Was there one point over the last 40 years which it was,
Well, the reinvention of the company, taking it on a in this very different direction of pure entertainment and pursuing some of the technologies that we pursued that others didn't believe in and would push back. But I'm never going to be unhappy with the fact that we truly lived up to our original sort of vision.
If your next chapter had to be something totally different, unmedia related, what would John Kamen be doing in John Kamen, we'll call it 10.0?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm about to do a next chapter for Radical in a new, very ambitious project. So I'll admit to you, I can't really think of anything other than that next thing that we're going to attempt to do. But I think that I would probably, if I would probably have been a little less reckless with all of my success and money, and probably been a little more thoughtful about, the ability to be independent. And instead, I still focus on what's next, because largely I'm still generating my future.
And the final question, so we'll get it at the 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
We know what the Kamen epitaph is not going to be. He really made a great Nike commercial. We've heard you say that. So what we want to know, John, is what would you like the Kamen epitaph to be?
Well, we made a lot of really great stuff, and we positively impacted a lot of lives.
That's great. Thank you. Oh, one other fast question, last 10 seconds.
Sure.
If you were looking back on the 21-year-old John Kamen, and you were turning and say, Johnny, based on my experience now as a guy who's been there and done that a lot of times, here's my advice to you. What do you tell the young John Kamen?
I probably would have listened to my accountant and saved a few more dollars every year. But my father always used to say, being of wise mind and body, he spent it all.
Can't take it with you.
Yeah, my father used to say, what I want to leave to my kids are good values and a work ethic.
That's it.
And you got him. Hey, giant thank you.
Terrific, guys.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, John. This was a total treat and pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Real pleasure. Andy, we'll get to see you soon. I'm hopefully one day I'll get to meet you in person and not just Zoom.
That sounds great.
Have a great day, guys.
Take care.
Thanks again, man.
Bye.
Appreciate it. This is Andy Greenfield, General Partner of TIA Ventures, thanking you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this interview with John Kamen on It's the People. If so, please visit our website at www.tiaventures.com, where you can find more interviews like this one. And we also encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, where we celebrate other stories of successful early-stage companies and founding teams and share their insights and secrets to success.